We are committed to creating and sharing knowledge that empowers children and young people to understand the steps they can take to reduce their risks, increase their resilience to mental health problems, and improve their mental health.
Our vision is to create a world with a sound mental health for all.
People do attempt suicide.
Naturally, people are bound to judge, but judging and expressing the judgment is not something that we can reserve for ourselves.
We find that suicide bereavement is even more difficult than losing someone through natural death.
Be empathetic in the way you approach their situation, because if you show too much sympathy, they'll also start feeling guilty.
Greetings to you all. Welcome to our show, Tap In. Hi everyone, this is Calvin. I'm sorry. Welcome to our next show. This is Tap In, as we're going to be discussing something to do with sex talk. Right here with me, I have Mr. Michael and Miss Nyarai. Please, welcome to the show. Please introduce yourselves.
Thank you very much. My name is Nyarai. I'm a family therapist and counselor. We are here to discuss adolescent sex and sexuality.
Thank you very much, Calvin, for having me on the show. My name is Michael White. I'm a student majoring in sociology at Midland State University, and we're here to discuss issues around adolescent sexuality.
As you have heard, we actually have professionals around here who are actually helping us concerning the issues to do with adolescent sexuality. So starting with you, Miss Nyarai, what do you understand by adolescent sexuality?
When we talk about adolescent sexuality, we are talking about the major changes that happens with the teenagers' sexual development. This is something that is scary for parents and even scary for the teens themselves. This is the major development that goes through their body, emotions, feelings, generally the physical development of a human being when they get to that age.
Oh, interesting. I guess we have a lot to talk about today. Mr. Michael, please just try to elaborate on what adolescent sexuality is.
Just like Nyara has mentioned, it's a very critical stage in a human development because there's so much biopsychosocial development that's going on. So it's potentially overwhelming. You look at how the hormonal changes are affecting the behavior, how the society is also impacting a child. And we're talking about someone who's just moving from childhood or from being a toddler, that's from 10 years up to 19. So that's a very critical stage in a human being's development.
I think you've actually mentioned something interesting. You mentioned something to do with factors leading to adolescent sexuality. Like, please just tell us factors actually that lead to early adolescent sexuality.
Really, there's quite a lot to be said about that. Like I said, we're talking about an age group where the kids are really learning and experimenting. So you talk about the hormonal, the biological factors that push children or teenagers into indulging in sexual activities. You talk about the family background, how the families influence sexual behavior, promote it because of lack of education. You talk about the influence of social media on these young minds.
Okay. Miss Nyarai, I'm sure we have so many factors that lead to actually early, activity in adolescent sexuality. Some of it being, family issues, something to do with background, something to do with poverty, lack of education. And looking at our country, I think we are actually underdeveloped to the extent that the economy is actually bad in its state. Just try to elaborate on that. How is it affecting, early adolescent sexuality?
Okay. Like we are saying, this is growth that is happening within individuals. They are growing from high school to university, there's migration. They are growing from university into the working world, there's also migration. So this can be rural to urban migration, this can be country to country migration, where you are living in the rural area, where it's very conservative. I should say it's still conservative, where it's still taboo to talk about sexual issues. And they are moving from a rural background into the city because they are coming for education into the universities. They are meeting different people with different cultures, with different backgrounds, with different peers that they are going to be associating with. There's so much that is happening from in the urban areas compared from somebody who's coming from the rural areas. So wanting to keeping up with what is happening, for example, trying to keeping up with the Kardashians, like I was saying, when you're coming from a rural background and you're going into an university in the urban area, there's so much that is happening. This is where most girls start indulging in sex because they want to keep up with their peers.
Still on that issue, do you think social media actually has influence? Does it have much impact on the, on these things that we're talking about?
Because talking about sex within the families is taboo. So people are learning all sorts from the media. Media is teaching them things that we don't talk or we don't share about at home. So it plays a major role because people are actually learning and getting information, some that is correct, some that is not correct. But because they don't have a position to verify, either going back to the family and verify what they are reading from the social media, so they'll just take in what they feel is correct, and yet it can be a dangerous situation. So social media does have, to a greater extent, a major role to play in issues of sexuality within our teenagers.
Mr. Michael.
And really, still on that social media, of late, there's been extensive coverage, and due to globalization, now we're getting so much information. In I would like to say, in developed countries, there's so many freedoms that are there, even in terms of dressing and grooming. And now that's impacting us, like Ms. Nyara said, a more conservative side of the world, part of the world. And you look at the entertainment industry, the fashion industry, it's promoting sexualized material, and that's really promoting the sexual activities among young people. So media really has influenced quite a lot in this area.
Interesting. I've noticed that there's actually a program that has been introduced for the past few years to do with sexual reproductive health system, and there's actually a department of counseling in it. What exactly is sexual reproductive health counseling?
Right. So it can be understood as age-appropriate sexual education that is administered to a child by a responsible adult.
Ms. Nyarai.
It has become so difficult because children as early as 9 are indulging in sexual activities. I think with recent research that was carried out here in Zimbabwe, in some areas, children as young as 9 are indulging in sex. So it is now the duty of everyone to be talking about sex, not only parents, but also in schools, because look at a 9-year-old. This is a grade 4, and some of them are already indulging in sex. So yes, there is so much talk about how we should really introduce these sex talks within schools so that we educate our kids as early as primary school level.
Is it effective? Is it happening in school that counseling is actually, being done in school and in churches, in our communities? Is it happening?
To a greater extent, it is happening, and information is being disseminated to the teenagers. But at the end of the day, it takes an individual to take in what they want to take in and what they want to learn. So this is the need for us to continue to hammer about it and talk more about it, and help them understand the dangers of indulging in early sexual activities.
Okay. Mr. Michael, how do you discuss sexual reproductive health, as a whole? How do you discuss it as an issue with your child, with your young brother, or with your very young relative who's around the stage of adolescence?
Like we said in our working definition, this sex education, the sex talk has to be age appropriate. So now you look at your child, it takes honest examination, and really it doesn't start when your child is moving towards this teenage years that we're talking about here. You have to develop a relationship with your child. You have to know your child so much that you can tell how much they know about the subject, and then tailor a conversation in that direction. So you start by expressing or letting them know the boundaries, the changes that they're going to be experiencing in their bodies, how their sex organs will start to then function, and how that might cause even psychological changes. So that would be a starting point. And then you grow from the age-appropriate material, telling them that if a person handles you this way, or that this type of content is not age-appropriate for you.
Okay, so I think I would love to believe that this sexual education is actually pretty much important in schools, in churches, in our community, in our society. Well, moving on, how can you deal with a child after finding out that he or she is actually indulging in sexual activity?
I think it's important to start from talking about sex itself. How are we talking about it? How is it said? How often do we talk about it? How much do we care about our children? As parents, usually we want to give children lectures about sex and sexuality, but I think it is supposed to be a dialogue instead. Understand what they know before we start giving them a lecture. Because once we start giving them a lecture, they will stop to listen and they'll stop even to ask. Then they'll end up looking for other alternatives to explore. So it's important to have a one-up approach or a one-down approach when we're talking in counseling. Understand what they know first before you start giving them a lecture.
Yeah.
Explain to them your values. Also hear their values. This will delay them having to engage into early sex, because you are not only hammering the dangers of sex, but you're also hearing from them what is it that they know about sex. So it's important to have a dialogue. Know when to talk about sex, how you should talk about it, when is the appropriate time to talk about it. Sometimes maybe driving to school in the morning, having dinner, look at the mood, assess the mood within the family setup. Is it the right time for us to be discussing such issues? Not to just jump in and start giving a lecture. You are blocking them out. Make it a conversation that is exciting. I know it's a taboo for parents. They find it so difficult and they want to shift the blame and take it to their aunties and uncles, but they also have their own kids. And are they giving them the right information? Let them understand from you as a parent. Also share your experiences and your fears about early sexual indulgence.
So I believe it's just not about teaching adolescents, but also teaching, the parents, because I'm sure concerning our country, it's something that is actually not easy to talk about, not easy to discuss amongst the family. So confirm it's actually something that we have to learn as a society, as a country, as a modern world, that we have to talk about it since the very young age, so that at least we help our children to become better humans.
Yes, the world is revolving. Things are changing. Look how technology has impacted on everybody's life. So parents also need to stay abreast with what is happening locally, socially, within their children's lives. They should also know what is being said on social medias. Most parents, they don't even know how to even operate a TV. So how then would you be able to understand what is going on social media? So parents also need to stay informed about where their children are getting this information when it comes to issues of sex. Identifying unique opportunities, and they have to be relaxed when they are talking about this. Because if we start hammering blame and judging of our own kids, they won't open up.
All
It
right.
becomes a stumbling block for us to be even discussing about sex.
All right.
So let's make it an interesting topic. Find the ways, the hows, the way, the appropriate time to do that.
All right. Mr. Michael, I'm sure communication is key in everything that we do in life. How much do you think communication is key in actually discussing activity that the adolescents are doing concerning, the sexuality?
It's important. Communication can really never be overemphasized. Like Ms. Nyara has rightfully said, that things have changed. We grew up knowing that sexuality education was a preserve of the aunts or the uncles. But now how often do our parents or people send their kids to the rural areas to then get this education? We're the ones who spend most of the time with our children. And communication requires us to know the other person, take a genuine interest in our children and be monitoring them, finding out what they're doing, and then being able to tailor an introduction to start a conversation, to steer up a discussion, I could say. We're not supposed to really impose things on them, but it has to be a dialogue. We have to understand their thoughts, their feelings, and really at this stage, because there's so many hormonal changes, the child will be very sensitive to a lot of emotions. So if you say the things, if they come out wrong, even if you have good intentions, you can create a firewall. Like Ms. Nyari said, you can block the whole conversation altogether. It won't go anywhere, and it won't help the situation.
All right. Sorry, just to take you back, I've noticed that, in schools, there are actually like condoms that are being introduced, or protections that are being introduced in schools. What's your take on that? Is it not a way of actually, trying to exercise, or actually trying to allow young adolescents to engage in sexual activity?
Interestingly, that's a very topical issue in Parliament at the moment. I think it's a decisive measure. It's really a protective measure, having contraceptives introduced in high schools or in tertiary or learning institutions as a whole. It's not really promoting sexual indulgence among teenagers or children, but it's really in response to what's really happening. Let's face it, whether we accept it or not, these children are exposed to sexually explicit material and they're practicing these things. And now we are faced with a greater challenge, like unwanted, unintended pregnancies, an increase in STIs and spread of HIV and AIDS, when national policies and interventions are trying to minimize these things. So really, it would then impact on even national and international development if we leave this, untouched.
Ms. Nyarai.
I think this issue is something that was taken with a handful of salts by the elders, where they thought that introducing contraception in schools and colleges is actually encouraging teenagers and adolescents to be indulging in sex. And yet, whether we want to believe it or not, whether we want to talk about it or not, these kids are indulging already. So what is better for us to give them the options to indulge in safe sex rather than to not even talk about it, and yet they are still doing it behind our backs. You've had cases where girls end up having backdoor miscarriages, abortions. They'll come out, she has died, she has such and such is happening within the colleges. So is it not better to teach them and help them understand the importance of protection than having to resort to backyard abortions? Because whether we want to deny the facts, it is happening. Even under our nose in the homes, it is happening, where kids will end up using these backyard abortions as well. But we are staying with the kids, they're not even in college, but it's still happening in the house. So I would rather talk to them about contraception. If we can't, let's refer them to clinics or health professions that can give them the correct information on protection, so that when they then decide to indulge, they know what to do.
I'm glad you actually said these kids are actually indulging in sexual activity, meaning we are actually admitting that these kids are doing it. But is there any way, or is there any way to stop adolescents in actually, indulging in this sexual activity, sexual behavior? Is there any way to stop it?
Maybe given the correct information, the correct understanding of the importance of early sexual debut, they can then decide to stop or not to indulge and wait until the appropriate time for them to indulge. It's only when we disseminate correct information and we give them the ability to understand and choose what is right or wrong, because if we hide behind the fact that they are not doing it, they are doing it. So they would rather do it in an appropriate way, and they know the dangers, understand the dangers, help them understand the dangers.
Mr. Michael, is there any way to stop it?
Yes, just adding on to what Ms. Nyari said, I think the key is in education. It will dispel ignorance, it will help them dispel the curiosity, and it will also help them become less susceptible to peer pressure, because now they understand what this means. They understand that whatever they're feeling in their bodies is natural. And really, let's not underestimate our kids, our children. They're really intelligent, they're rational human beings. when they fully understand what something really means, they can, I think they can come up with really good personal decisions. It's also good for them life skills, because now you're promoting rational and critical thinking amongst this age group.
Sorry, due to our time, just give us a conclusion on the whole topic to do with adolescent sexuality.
And in conclusion, I would say the key is in education. Take an interest, be watching your kids. Parents need to take the initiative to really administer and offer this education, and not really leave it for someone else to do it, because if they don't do it, these kids are going to learn it from elsewhere, and best believe they might not get the best information from everywhere else except their parents.
All right, thank you. Ms. Nyarai, please just give us a very short conclusion on the whole topic to do with our sex talk.
I think I'll focus more on the parents, that they should avoid overreacting when their teens start to discuss about their personal experiences when it comes to sexual issues. When they overreact, it just closes them up and they won't be able to discuss further. So leave it as an open door where they can come in and be comfortable and talk and share their experiences, so that you understand where they are coming from and give the correct information.
Ladies and gentlemen, it was an honor to have Ms. Nyarai and Mr. Michael here with us as we were discussing a topic to do with sex talk. The reason is that we want to make the world better. We want to make our young brothers, our young people, to become better humans for their tomorrow. I'm sure this was a great lesson, and I hope everyone has actually picked one or two notes so that at least we make a better world. Thank you.